Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Identifying Your Leader Language. I'm Gary Kishbaugh with Compass Action Coach. And today, what we really want to do by the end of the webinar is have you be able to identify the styles and types of leadership languages that you prevalently use. There are several different types, and depending on the situation and depending on the timing, we all use various parts of them, but there are some that are predominant uh, languages. So by the time that we're done, you'll be able to identify that. What you will need today is you'll need a writing utensil and a piece of paper. I'm going to have you write a few questions, and don't worry, no one's going to be graded, but have you fill some answers in and then follow along, and then we'll be able to determine what are your predominant leadership languages, and then have a few suggestions at the end of the webinar. So the first thing is, how do you define leadership? So I want you to complete this question. Write this on your sheet of paper. A good leader should always, you fill in the rest. Now, how you fill that out and finish that sentence will tell you a lot about your leadership style. So let's talk about what makes a good leader. James McGregor Burns, who's a Pulitzer Prize winning expert on leadership, really defines an effective leader as somebody who does the following four things. The first is create an inspiring vision of the future. Second is motivates and inspires people to engage with that vision. Third, they manage the delivery of the vision. And lastly, they coach and build a team so that it's more effective at achieving the vision. Okay? So the one thing you have to remember is leadership is a fluid practice. If you strive to be a leader, you always will be changing. You'll be improving based on the information you learn, based on the needs your teams have, and every team is a little different. Every person on your team is a little different. The longer you act as a leader, the more likely it is that they'll change the way you lead, not only now but situationally. And that way, you'll change how you complete the sentence. A good leader should always blank. So let's see how you answered the question. A good leader should always what? Right? So it's time for the little test. And when I say a test, don't worry, we're not grading. What it is, it's really of a profile. So I am going to ask you several different statements. I'm going to tell you the type of communicator this is, and then you're going to pick out the options that most closely align with your style or your beliefs, or if you agree with it. And so each area is going to be followed starting with a letter and then a number. It'll be either an A1, A2, A3, S1, S2, S3, and just write down the ones that you agree with. And at the end, what we'll do is we'll put it into a key, and they're not correlating to what we're talking about right now, but at the end, it'll correlate to your primary leadership language. So let's begin with that. And the first one is the individualist. Now, an individualist is self-aware, they're creative, they're really focused on their own actions. They're exceptionally driven by the desire to exceed all personal goals, and they want to constantly improve their skills. And I'm sure as we talk through each one of these, you're picturing people that you know, including yourself. So here's some statements that an individualist leader would agree with. Now, again, we're going to start off with, in each area, this one will be an I. It'll be an I1, an I2, or an I3. So just write down the one that you agree with. I1, a good leader should always trust their own intuition, even over established organizational processes. That's I1. I2, it's important to be able to relate to others so I can easily communicate complex ideas to them. I3, I'm more comfortable with progress than sustained success. Now, you don't have to write down anything from a section if it's not an area that you agree with or identify with. Okay? Now, the next one we talk about is a strategist. And strategists, they're extremely aware of the environments that they're in. Okay, they make it a point to gather a deep understanding of structures and processes that make the business go, and apply critical thinking to improve those. Here's some things a strategist might say. S1, a good leader should always be able to build a consensus in a divided group. S2, it's important to help develop an organization as a whole, in addition to the growth of the individuals. S3, conflict is inevitable, but I know enough about my team's personal and professional relationships that I can help manage them through the friction. Next is the alchemist. What distinguishes alchemists from others is their unique ability to see both the big picture and everything, while also paying attention to the small details so that no department and no employee is overlooked. Here's some statements an alchemist might say. A1, a good leader helps their employees reach their highest potential and possesses the necessary empathy with moral awareness to get there. A2, it's important to make a profound and positive impact on whatever I'm working on. A3, I have a unique ability to balance short term needs and long term goals. Some of you will have many things written down right now, and some not as much. Both are okay. Now, the next one is the opportunist. Opportunists, just like it says, they're guided by opportunity, and they have a level of mistrust in others, and they rely on a facade of control to keep their employees in line. They're the type of people that believe an eye for an eye. Now, here's some things that an opportunist might say. Oh, one, a good leader should always view others as potential competition to be bested, even if it's the expense of their own personal development. Oh, two, I reserve the right to reject the input of others who question or criticize my ideas. I know there's people smiling right now saying, I know somebody like that. I used to work for them. Okay. The next is the diplomat. Just like it says, the diplomat seeks to cause minimal impact. They conform a lot to existing norms, as little friction as possible, right? They want to keep things moving along smoothly. Smoothly is the key for them. And here's some things a diplomat might say. D1, a good leader should always resist change since it causes instability. D2, it's important to provide the social glue in team situations safely away from conflict. D3, I tend to thrive in more team oriented or supportive leadership roles. Next is the expert. The expert's always in the front line of their field and continuously strives to perfect their knowledge, but they can generally stand to improve their emotional intelligence. Mhm. Here's some statements an expert might agree with. E1, A good leader should prioritize the pursuit of their own knowledge growth over the needs of the organization and of their direct reports. E2, when problem solving with others, my opinion tends to be the correct one. Now let's take a quick look at your notes and let's see what leader you're most like. And I know in everybody's minds right now, they're picturing a lot of other people too, as we all do. All right, now I'm going to show you a table, and on the table, you're going to see different names of different leadership styles. And after that, you'll see the corresponding A1, S3, D2. And then what you want to do is write down the leadership language that you've identified. There'll be more than one in many cases. Sometimes it could be two, sometimes three, sometimes four. So I want you to write those down, and then we're going to go through what those leadership languages are. Okay, here's the table. I'm going to give you about a minute. So if you'll go through and write down every style of leadership language that you align with. Okay, now the more statements you agreed with, the more likely you are to practice that mix of leadership styles. So, and here's how we break it down. If you agreed with everything the strategist said, S1, S2, S3, this could make you 66% a strategic leader and 33% a democratic leader. If you agreed with just S3, but everything else the Alchemist said, this would make you a 50% transformational leader, 25% strategic, 25 democratic. Okay. Now let me ask, are you surprised by the outcome? So let's look through each one of these and get a little more in detail. First one is democratic leadership. If you fell into the category of democratic leadership, you're going to be happy to know that this style is commonly very effective. These types of leaders make decisions based on the input of the team member. And even though the leader may make the final call, every employee has an equal say on the project's direction. Democratic leadership is one of the most effective styles because it allows employees to exercise authority. It gives them more skin in the game and generally makes them more loyal to the company as a whole as they feel their contributions are noted. Democratic leadership gives the whole team a few decision related options, then have an open discussion about each, and then either the leader makes the decision or they'll put it to a vote of the team depending on the subject matter. If you came out as an autocratic leadership or part of your style is, that's the exact opposite of a democratic leader. Okay? It's not effective long term because employees are not considered or consulted and are expected to adhere to this decision. In today's culture, especially, this type of leadership style just can't be sustained without losing great employees. Now, that doesn't mean that this leadership style doesn't, on occasion, have its benefits. For example, in the case of an emergency, you don't want to have a democratic style. Sometimes somebody has to take charge and say, the building's on fire. Everybody pick your stuff up and let's get out of the building. If you fell under this leadership category, work more on being open to the perspective of the rest of the team. Remember one thing, you don't have to do it alone. Most people that fall under autocratic are really worried about things going wrong. So just remember, you don't have to do it on your own. In the case of the of laissez faire, just like the French term says, which it literally translates to "let them do," Excuse me. This refers to leaders um, who hand over almost all their authority to their team. Um, an example where a good time, or excuse me, a good application of this is in a young startup. You might say laissez-faire founder by they're busy trying to focus on the big picture and trying to keep the company moving forward. So they don't focus on office policies that are around work hours or deadlines. And they put a lot of trust into their employees so that they can focus on those big pieces in the business. Well, this leadership is very empowering for employees. It can also limit their development and overlook critical company growth opportunities. So this leadership is situational like many others. Strategic leaders, they sit at the intersection between a company's main operations and their growth opportunities. And these types of leaders are constantly vigilant. They're honing their ability to anticipate. They scan the environment. They're looking for signals of changes. They want to be ahead rather than reacting. Okay? They also have a tendency to study failures, especially their own and their teams, to find a constructive way to find hidden lessons. Their belief is that they should never make the same mistake twice. So they want to know the root cause. Transformational leadership, for those of you who fell into this area, they're always working to improve upon the status quo. They push their team to grow outside their comfort zone. Many times you'll hear athletes talk about their coaches, how they may not necessarily like the coach, but the coach gets the best performance out of them. This is desired really among growth minded companies. It motivates employees to see what they're actually capable of instead of what they think their abilities are. The one potential downfall to transformational leadership is that it can risk losing sight of everyone's individual learning curve, especially if the correct type of coaching and direction isn't provided. There needs to be a lot of communication with the employees to make sure that you understand what their capabilities are and understand what the next steps are to help that employee get out of that comfort zone. Okay. Transactional leadership, it's one of the most common types of leaders. Managers reward their employees precisely for the work that they're expected to do. Okay. These types of leaders lean on things like scheduled bonuses, stay in the status quo. They encourage their employees to do what they have to for earning these compensation and benefits. The one downside to this is that the employees will do the bare minimum and they have a sense of entitlement that these are no longer people that are motivated by performing the best. They're motivated by earning whatever bonus. And so what you'll see is over a longer period of time, this will actually become less motivational and will actually have the employees' performance decline. Bureaucratic leadership today, some of they used to call it traditional. Today, they tell you it's old school, right? They go by the books. They reject ideas that conflict with company policies. This is the policy. This is how we do it. They follow the rules only. Employees under this leadership may not feel as controlled as they do under other types of leadership. And that's because the policies are in place and the leader falls back on the policy. The truth is, there still is a lack of freedom in how much people are able to do within their roles. And it has a tendency of discouraging innovation, discouraging ambition, and growth-oriented companies would really want to avoid this. It's great for performing exactly to the process, but it doesn't allow team members to go outside above and beyond or challenge the processes so that might benefit the company as well as the customers they serve. So, what's the key to great leadership? Hmm? Always, it's better communication. It doesn't matter what leadership style you fall into. There are aspects you should always try to improve on, and the number one area is communication. We talked earlier about the four qualities of a leader, and if you notice, all of them are surrounded around vision and different ways to understand or support the vision. What historically we see in companies is that they either don't paint the vision very clearly or they don't help the team understand how to get there. And the analogy that I use is the Wizard of Oz. How many people have seen the Wizard of Oz? Well, Dorothy needs to get to Kansas, but to get to Kansas, she has to go to the Emerald City. So she actually brings her team together, and to help them, she understands and tells them why they want to get to this vision. Now, just to take her home wasn't enough. In the case of the Scarecrow, he wanted a brain. In the case of the Tin Man, he wanted a heart. And in the case of the Cowardly Lion, he wanted some courage. So she was able to get them to focus on the vision, which is getting to the Emerald City. She was going to have her benefit out of it, and so were they. Now, the next step she did is she communicated the path they were going to go on. And we all know that, follow the yellow brick road. So the biggest thing is communication. As a leader, you need to be clear and succinct, right? You have to explain goals, tasks, and everything else to your team members. The reason being is that we think that we're very clear, but we may or may not be to that team member. Have you ever had a employer who starts and begins to talk and goes on and on and on, and you never really know what they say when you're done, and you're even more confused of the direction you're supposed to be going in? So one of the keys to leadership is mastering all forms of communication, including one-to-one, if you have departmental meetings, staff-wide meetings, and even more important is proper etiquette for communicating when you're using other terms such as phone calls. Email is a big one. People either don't communicate well or send long, very vague emails. And last area is social media and communicating. Now, a large part of creating an open and, for the lack of a better term, steady flow of communication with your team is creating an environment of trust and positive feedback when people choose to come to with the ideas. No matter what they do, recognize their idea as something that's good or should be thought about. Not necessarily that it's the right answer, but it's certainly something worth communicating about further. And the reason being is that people can benefit from the confidence, and they'll bring, and maybe this idea isn't the greatest, but the next one could be. And remember, there's three things you have to know when you're communicating with somebody. The first one is reading the body language of those you're talking with, but also remember they're reading your body language. The second one is reducing ambiguity when you both in both when you're speaking as well as writing. Very clear bullet points. I know what I need to do. Okay. And last, I would recommend everybody spend time to learn about active listening. We have a tendency, and I'm sure you've seen the type of person you're trying to talk to them, and you can see their mouth change. They're actually more focused on their response than they are on hearing everything that you have to say. Well, I can tell you, all of us have been that way at one time or another. We just don't notice it. And there are some people that are that way all the time. So you need to keep yourself very focused on learning active listening skills. Now, how do you keep your team motivated? It doesn't matter the leadership style you fall into. We know there's aspects that in your job that you're going to need to inspire people to go the extra mile. And the way you do that is you help build their self-esteem along the way. Why? It helps them to stay loyal to the company. And especially in the days of the millennials, they're looking for the why. The why is everything. So if they don't feel that you're vested in helping them build their career, helping them become better, helping them achieve their goals, they have a tendency of leaving or not performing optimally. Okay. Now, to keep them motivated, show everybody that you're committed to them. Ask for their feedback. Be open to listening to not only their ideas, but their concerns. A big one is recognize them in front of the rest of the team. State something that's important and understand the difference in their work styles and personalities. So what you do when you recognize them in front of the team, it may be something, and I would not recommend that you recommend every member of the team in a meeting, because then it becomes nothing but it's my turn. But you recognize contributions, ideas, somebody working harder. And another way also is when you have an opportunity one-to-one to say thank you for what the work you just did. We couldn't be successful without that effort. Thank you for staying a little bit longer. Thank you for getting this done. Our company is better for you being here. Those little bits of praise helps build employee self-esteem. It helps build trust with the leader, and you're going to see a difference in them. You can pay for their brain, you can pay for their back, which is their labor, but you have to earn their heart, and that's the loyalty. Now, one of the biggest challenges leaders have is practicing the ability to delegate. Now, it's common amongst most novice leaders to believe delegating is a sign of weakness, and it's not. But it's also with most experienced leaders that instead of delegating, they abdicate, right? They either are all in or they're all out. And you really can't do that. What you have to do is you have to identify the skills of your employees and assign duties that are based on their skills as well as the skills you want them to develop while not overwhelming them. You're going to be smart, strategic, and resourceful when you're doing this. So you're having an employee who can handle the project you have them on, but you also want to make them stretch a little bit so they're continually growing. Use your communication skills to define the expectations, and then also find out what each employee is willing to take on. In some cases, they want to take on more. In other cases, they feel they're going to be overwhelmed, right? And please be creative in the way that you assign responsibilities. Ask for feedback for the best way to take on a task. Don't ask if you understand, because people will say yes. They're not going to say, I don't understand. Instead, ask saying, okay, what exactly are we going to do? Just because you've doing something yourself, you've been doing something one way, it doesn't mean there isn't a second or third or fourth way that somebody else could do it that could be just as good. So remember to be flexible. My old business coach used to tell me, Gary, that's the right answer. No, that is a right answer. There are more than one. So I had to change my mindset from this is the right answer to this is a right answer. And what are the others? So I could start looking at all the possibilities. Now, the trust you give others to handle larger parts of the business will provide them with a huge boost of self esteem. It'll make them feel like they have more um, impact in the success of the company, more contribution, and also develop more loyalty. So just be sure that when you're with them, you're encouraging open communication so that no one ever feels overwhelmed or ill equipped because they want to complete the tasks. Nobody wants to come to work and not succeed. Sometimes they're just afraid to point out to their team leader that they may not have the skills. So by asking them the right questions, you'll see areas where you can help coach them and help bring them to the level of performance rather than the adage, well, they should just know this. They've been trained. Now, Simon Sinek, who's one of my favorites of all the people dealing with leadership today, says, a boss has the title, a leader has the people. And that's really true. Somebody can get a title, and that doesn't mean they're effective, and it doesn't mean their people will follow them. A leader will follow people. They'll follow them within the company. They don't even have to be a supervisor. They'll follow them outside of the company. How many people have you seen over their career that they've moved from company to company to follow somebody who has done a tremendous job of developing them? So remember, the leader has true power because people want to follow them. I'd like to say thank you for spending this time with us and learning more about leadership styles. And I know your day is very busy and appreciate you taking the time. I hope you've learned something very valuable and allowing everybody to take steps towards becoming a better leader. If you have any further questions at all about what we discussed, or you want to talk further about how to improve or hone leadership skills or anything else, please feel free to contact me. Either link through LinkedIn at www.linkedin.com/in/Gary Kishbaugh. And remember, Gary has 2 R's, or through my email address, which is garykishbaugh@actioncoach.com. In addition, for everyone who signed up for this webinar, you will be receiving in the next 48 hours a link to the webinar in case you would like to go back and listen to it again, or please feel free to share it with anyone else who you think might have benefit from looking at leadership styles and seeing how they can improve. So I hope you've learned a lot. We look forward to my next webinar, which will happen in the month of October. Thanks and have a great day.